Hello, and welcome to these discussions between Roger Wagner and Michael Peppard and myself, Luke Walton. I'm a film producer, and my colleagues are going to take us on a wonderful journey through Dura Europa. And we've been talking in our previous couple of films, if you've not seen them, about the extraordinary baptistry in the world's oldest church. And in those images, there's an extraordinary fresco around the baptistry with various different images. And Michael, I wonder if you could take us through those images that I've got in front of me here and just describe them for us and why are they there?
Absolutely. So the first thing to say is that we do not have the entirety of the walls of this room. So what we have is the entirety of the western wall and some of the north and some of the south, and then very, very little of the eastern wall. And this was because when the Roman garrison defending Dura Europos built a rampart to defend the western wall of their city, there was a kind of slanted a slope that they packed with earth. And so they really packed and filled in this whole street, which preserved it for us, but ended up eliminating some of it. So we don't have everything, but the positive news is that we do have something on the walls, and we have very few ancient walls at all. So a lot of floors from antiquity, but not too many walls. So we're happy with what we have. When you process around that kind of half of an artistic program, the first thing you see when you walk in is actually a painting of a doorway right as you enter the threshold of the door, which I think is a really beautiful convergence of art and ritual, that you see a door painted on the wall when you walk through the door in. And then you see on the lower register, the bottom half, you see a procession of women going around the eastern and the northern wall. And you see their feet and you see part of their figures. We'll talk more about that in another video. On the upper register, though, we seem to have a series of miracle stories, probably all related to water in some way, which would make sense in a baptistry. We have Jesus walking on the water with Peter. We have a healing of the paralytic, which is in all four Gospels. This is the one where it's rise, take up your mat, and walk. But in the Gospel of John, it is situated near the pool of Bethesda, a healing pool outside of Jerusalem. And so that connection of water makes sense. And then, of course, above the font, we have the shepherd and sheep image and an Adam and Eve image, in which the sheep are kind of bending down to eat or to drink. So there's a kind of art ritual convergence between the water in the font and perhaps the water of life that the sheep are drinking. Now, one image that's very unusual is an image of David slaying Goliath. And in my book, I argue that we can understand this one in more of the militaristic imagination of the town. This is very much a military town, and the idea that they would view victory as a metaphor for salvation makes a bit more sense, right? And that they would look back to David, the psalmist, but also David, the warrior, and think about how the power of David over his enemies and over the enemies of the God of Israel might be given to them through their initiation, that there would be a theme of empowerment as part of their salvation. Then we have a woman at a well, which I can talk about at great length if anyone wants, because that's the most audacious argument of my book. But a woman at the well who could be interpreted either as the Samaritan woman at the well or as an image of the Virgin Mary at her Annunciation. And then finally, the final piece is very tantalizing. It's on the upper register of the program, on the southern wall, and there's fragments that are photographed and called a garden scene, because there are a lot of plants that were preserved there in the painting, and they don't seem to be merely decorative around the perimeter, but seem to have been part of the program. Unfortunately, we don't have these fragments, either due to them getting lost in transmission from Syria to New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale University is, or because they crumbled away, perhaps in being removed in the 1930s. It's hard to know. But we do have photograph and descriptions on site, and it's hard to know exactly how to interpret it, but my best guess is that the upper register of the artistic program started in a scene of paradise from which rivers flowed out. Water flowed kind of around the bottom of that upper register, leading to miracle stories relating to water, of which we could imagine others that could have been drawn from the Bible. and we have other imagery from early Christianity and from early Byzantine Christianity, where the four rivers flowing out from the Garden of Paradise is a prominent theme for imagining heaven and imagining salvation as a kind of return to the state of Eden or a return to paradise.
All of these are really rich themes for the context of a baptistry. I think that's really fascinating. Roger, when you visited it, of course, you weren't aware of the missing fresco, the Paradise Garden, but this is actually was quite a revelation for you when you discovered, because you have designed a window around a baptistry. So in a way, you've been, well, not in a way, you have been commissioned to do artwork around a different baptistry. And you had a connection with this Paradise Garden too.
Yeah, I mean, when I read Michael's book and heard that description of this missing fresco, I was absolutely fascinated because, yeah, as you say, I'd been asked many years before that to do a window in Iffley Church, which is my sort of local church where I worship at, and it's an extraordinary sort of 12th century church which actually has got a kind of baptistry as you sort of go into the church. So it's got sort of three doors that go into it. It goes down to the church is just above a river, and it's thought, you know, kind of the idea would be go down to the river, and it's got this amazing sort of huge, great sort of font, which is the three doors converge on. And I was asked to do a window that would relate to the font, and so there's a wonderful window just opposite by a great British artist, John Piper, which has got a sort of tree of life. And so I came up with this idea of a tree of life with sort of Christ on the tree. But then I at the bottom of the tree I put sheep, and then I had this sort of idea that to relate it to the font, I would have a kind of paradise garden with a river sort of flowing through it, as it were, down to the font. And then some years later, with a friend, Nicholas Miney, who's a wonderful sort of sculptor, we together made a cover for the font, which had the same kind of lines of sort of waving water on it, and an inscription: "If anyone is a new creation, if anyone is in Christ, there is a new creation. The old is gone, the new is born." And so we'd done all this, and then I read Michael's book, and I just couldn't believe that I'd already had the sort of the idea, walking on water, which had related to a sort of picture that I'd done before, and here was, I had never thought that this aspect of the baptistry would relate to this. But so when I read about this Paradise Garden image, I immediately got in touch with Megan at the Yale Art Gallery and asked if she could dig out a photograph and sort of send it to me, because I was just fascinated to see if what Michael said was plausible, and eventually it came through, and it's a black and white photograph. You can't see, but you can see that clearly that there are some sort of plants on it, and when you read what the excavator said, it was a sort of garden, and you can kind of see waving lines beneath it. So it just seemed to be there's just one of these lovely kind of parallels that the church was just coming up with the whole time.
Well, that's just one more.
Yeah, go on, Michael.
Just add one last comment before we turn to the poem. I neglected to say that if this is a four rivers of paradise flowing out of the garden idea, one of those four rivers in Genesis is the Euphrates. So it would again make great local sense that they have that image. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I was wondering that because and the Genesis description of the Euphrates in that context. The garden and the growing image is a very strong one. There's a wonderful one of the very few paintings of the Beatitudes has the growth of virtue coming out of the garden of the Beatitudes, as it were. And so it's a very rich image. But it led you to write a poem on this particular subject, poem 5, I think it is. Could you read that for us, Roger?
Yeah. So This is the poem. This is really about the window. A man, a river, and a tree enamelled with the flowers of May. Good Friday sky as blue as sea, a hill as green as Easter Day. A tree, a river, and a man who hangs from branches thick with flowers. A love that flowed since time began is measured here in 3 long hours. A man, a tree, a river flows down to the font and origin, where man, tree, river all disclose the Easter where our lives begin.